FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz, and today is 2/11/20. Well, if you've been watching, stock market keeps going up. Well, it looked like it was going to go down, and then it went up. Tesla peaked almost at 1,000. Now it's back down to earth at a moderately valued high 700s. Is it really worth it? I think our next contest is guess the price of Tesla by April 15th, tax day. I think that would be a fitting tribute to the stock. What its valuation will be on tax day. Well, we've got lots more. Trump acquitted, Democrats imploding, and the world is once again safe for crony capitalism. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? Well, heck, we want to hear from you. John Rubino and I are on kl@kerrylutz.com. Let's hear your comments. I want to just do a shout out, John, before we get started, to Brian, who was kind enough to buy me an overpriced and greatly inflated brunch at the Breakers in Palm Beach on Saturday. I met his lovely wife. We had a great time. So shout out to you, Brian, and thanks for the brunch. I'll pick up the tab next time, I promise. Anyway, John, so yeah, I got a text from Brian, been an FSN community member for years and years already, 5 years. Hey, I'm going up to Palm Beach. Do you want to be our guest at the Breakers, which is like one of the fanciest hotels on the planet, for brunch? And of course, I jumped at it because, you know, it's really like over the top, old world elegance, charm, everything else. Kind of everything that a Trump property isn't, the Breakers is. And I'm getting to something here in that, you know, if you're going to try to kill the king, you better kill him, because if you don't, you'll wind up in a gulag, or in the United States, worse than that, you'll wind up out of a job, right?
Hey, Kerry, was that a question for me?
Yeah, well, I'm saying, you know, if you're going to try to kill the king, you better take him down with the first shot, because otherwise, you know, in other countries, they would just kill you, right? In the Middle East, in the former Soviet Union, all these places. But in the United States, you just get fired and shown out the door, which to some people they would consider worse than being sent to a re-education camp or a gulag, you know?
Yeah, well, you know, there's all this outrage about Trump firing the people who testified against him in the impeachment trial, but it would be stranger if he just left them there working for him after they tried to get him convicted of a crime, you know? So, and he's allowed to hire and fire who he wants to in the executive branch. So this is all yet another thing that is kind of fake outrage that really doesn't mean anything. It goes away. But let's see. Should we start with the political side of this or the financial side? Because they're both really bizarre and fascinating right now.
Let's start with the financial side, because that always leads to the political eventually. Anyway, there's kind of no avoiding that, John.
Yeah. Well, you know, we are in investors' paradise right now, because if you're terrified of what's happening, you think the economy is going to tip into a recession, and you bought a bunch of government bonds, right? Because you went risk off. Well, all of a sudden interest rates plunge and the value of your government bonds go way up. But if you're totally optimistic and you think good things are coming and corporate profits are going to rise and stocks are going to go up, and you bought a bunch of stocks, they're up too. And if you bought gold, that's up. If you bought real estate, that's up. Everything is up. And the reason for that is the central banks of the world are flooding the system with new cash, and they're standing ready to flood the system with even more new cash if anything bad happens. For instance, this coronavirus thing is a great example. If it continues to expand and shuts down the global economy, then the central banks will just cut interest rates to below zero and pump out as much cash as it takes to keep everything going. That money will flow into financial assets. So the stock market will go up in that scenario, probably. And people betting on that right now are bidding up stocks in anticipation. On the other hand, if they get the virus thing under control and the economy continues to grow and corporate profits go up, central banks can sit on the sidelines while stocks and bonds both go up because the economy is throwing off so much cash. So everybody's buying stuff in anticipation of good times because the central banks basically have our backs now. In other words, bad news is good news in today's world. And, at some point that ends because basically what the central banks are doing is encouraging more and more debt creation and more leverage in the financial system. And that always inevitably blows up on a system that goes that route. But right now, people aren't thinking about that yet. They're not thinking about the consequence of all this debt. They're just thinking about the fact that lots of new cash coming in one way or another will push up the prices of whatever assets they're looking at. And, you mentioned Tesla as an example of that. And we should probably cover my Tesla short in this segment because we talked about it before. So I need to mention it. Yeah. So check this out. I as we talked about, I've been watching Tesla for a long time and thinking maybe it's time to short it. Maybe. And then it went up, a week and a half ago, it went up by like $60 in a day. And I thought, all right, there's the parabolic blow off top. And I shorted it. And in the next 2 days, it went up more than any stock has ever gone up in the history of stocks. What are the odds of that? That's something you can be in investing for a really long time and not participate in a record-setting thing going the other way like that. And then it went back down as much as any other stock has ever gone back down. And now it's up again today, but slightly. So, it's not clear where all of this goes, but it was just a really interesting thing to, participate in.
Well, I'll tell you what. I knew it was going to crash, but you know what's going to happen? This thing's going to go back up again, John. I mean, there's almost no question about it. In my humble estimation, it's going to hit a new high. This is just a pullback. So some smart money duck to the sidelines. Now they're going to suck in more dumb money and more dumb money. Like, one of my oldest friends, I told him 2 weeks ago, he bought in for 300. I said, you know what? Sell half of it for 600 and let the rest ride and don't worry about it. And that's exactly what he did. So it went to 960 something. Now it's 7 something or other. Doesn't really matter. It's going to probably break 1,000 because that's how they're going to bring in the last tranche of sucker money, and then it's going to crash. I mean, this is so predictable because it's the parabolic curve, and you'll see that double top. So $1,000 is only 30 something dollars higher than it was before. Maybe it'll hit 1,100, maybe 12, but then it's going to pull a Bitcoin. And that's why I say that Tesla is the Bitcoin of the stock market, John.
Well, just on general principle, I'm happy to bet against the last bit of dumb money that's flowing into something. So I'm going to stay short, and we'll see how this goes. But
you're not.
But yeah,
you're not shorting the stock, though. You should emphasize that because you actually shorted the stock. You could have like monumental losses. You're doing option plays, and there your risk is limited. But these 1 week options, John, like turned into like literally golden opportunities there. They just
well, that's how bubbles work. You see these fortunes being made in the last blow off parabolic move in something. And that sucks in the people who've been on the sidelines for a long time and just can't resist that easy money anymore, and they bid it way up. Now, I of course thought that happened 2 weeks ago when it went up $65 in one day. But, it's possibly still out there, like you said, where there's one more spike. But you know what? That's historically a good time to be betting against it. You suffer in the short run in that last gasp of really dumb money that flows in, and then you make out later if you've got time. And the options I bought have about 2 years to run, so that seems like plenty of time for something bad to happen to Tesla stock. Because remember, there's a recession coming, and when recessions happen, the high flying stocks of the previous cycle get whacked, even if they're great companies. In 2007, 2008, 2009, Amazon and Apple went way down even. So Tesla will probably suffer in the same way in the next recession. So I'm reasonably relaxed about the fact that it's bouncing all over the place right now, just because there's this other thing that's coming. And then you got the whole coronavirus thing. That's a really fascinating thing. We've never lived through an actual pandemic before. There have been scares with Ebola, this, and SARS, that, but they were never the kind of thing that's happening right now, where you get entire cities in China that are shutting down and plane flights being canceled all over the place and stuff. And the amount of crazy sounding news that's coming out with this thing is just amazing, because you've got half the news saying, oh, this guy who was in Wuhan the other day says there's actually 50,000 dead people, and other people saying, the factories are restarting. China's got this under control. And nobody really seems to, well, actually somebody knows, but we can't tell who knows, which of these sources are correct at the moment. So there's no way to tell, for somebody who's not in the middle of it, which way this thing goes. So it's still definitely something we got to pay attention to, but it could just be one of those things like, when those hurricanes are going to hit the East Coast and cause $1 trillion of damage, and then they turn up and completely miss the coast, but everybody watched it for a while. It might be one of those kinds of scares that don't amount to anything earth-shattering, but it might also be something a lot more serious. So that's the kind of thing that's hanging out there over the system that we can't predict. This has nothing to do with the amount of debt that's in the system. It has nothing to do with politics anywhere. It's just something that is happening external to human activity. Now, it's just arrived, and it's going to do what it's going to do, regardless of what we do about it.
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. And one thing that's really interesting. So you got these two cruise ships that are literally, it's the Voyage of the Damned. Remember that during World War II, there was this a ship with a bunch of Jewish people fleeing Nazi Germany, and no country will take it, including the U.S., and then it returns back, and they're all killed. Well, here, all these people have to stay on there till there's no more spread. And on this Japanese ship, they're up to 60 some odd cases. So it's teaching them a lot. But the amazing thing, John, is it's just really not taking off at this point in the West. In Europe, there's 12 cases. In the UK, in the United States, supposedly 12 that we know about, right? But really, there's not a whole lot happening.
Yeah. So far, in terms of numbers, right? It's a serious thing for anybody affected by it, but there aren't that many people in the developed world affected by it yet. So that's what is still to be discovered. How virulent is this thing? How far is it going to spread beyond China? But just hamstringing China's economy is a big deal for the global financial system, because China has been the engine that pulled us out of the financial trouble we've been in for the past decade or so. They quintupled, I guess, their debt post Great Recession, and used all that extra money to buy raw materials from everywhere in the world in order to build out their infrastructure, and that pulled the global economy out of the Great Recession. So if China now is the thing pulling us back into the next slowdown, it's not obviously clear where the next boom originates and pulls us out of the trouble. So, that's an interesting thing to watch too, because that's a financial story, which is a lot easier to predict than a pandemic is. So if China slows down, there are predictions of Chinese growth dropping to literally zero over the next year, when normally it's, at least in terms of official numbers, it's 6, 7, 8%, which involves a huge influx of raw materials into the country as they build roads and bridges and airports and whole new cities. So if that process were to kind of grind to a halt, where growth is zero in China for a year, and then what does that do to the rest of the global economy? And that's a really interesting question from a financial standpoint, because if for instance, if the raw materials sector of the global economy slows way down, then that's a big hit for a lot of different countries. and a lot of different major companies and a lot of different stock exchanges. So, and then that leads the Fed to cut interest rates back to zero and flood the system with cash. And you get the financial effects of that. So, that brings us back to the bad news is good news thing, because it could be that a Chinese slowdown is the thing that puts us into negative interest rates in the US. And what does that do to the US housing market? If you can get a negative interest rate mortgage, aren't you kind of obligated to buy a house then, just on principle? I would feel that way. I'd feel like I would have to go out and buy some kind of big real estate if somebody was going to give me a negative 1% interest rate on the mortgage.
Exactly.
So you would think that would ignite another financial boom. But the fact that we've already borrowed insane amounts of money is sitting on the other side of that argument saying, no, you're as leveraged as you can get. It doesn't matter what interest rates are. So, Carrie, this is just a fascinating time for an economics nerd, because we're doing all this stuff that we should never have tried and that theory says probably won't work. But by God, we're going to go do it anyhow. We're going to find out if theory is true and it doesn't work, or if, the other set of theories that involve modern monetary theory and socialism in general are actually the true theories, actually the things that define how the world works. And if we can just go on forever with negative interest rates and massive government deficits, et cetera, we'll find out. And
We will.
I'm fascinated by the process, but terrified of the worst case scenario that flows from all this.
Yeah, well, the worst case scenario is is really bad. So let's hope that doesn't come about. The fear is almost always worse than the reality, but this might be the one case where it really isn't. And then we've got, of course, political instability. And we're just getting through the so-called impeachment, Trump, orange man bad removal process, which just was a fool's errand. It couldn't work. And I don't know what they were hoping when they tried it, but it seemed to me it was pretty stupid. But now Trump is striking back, and he is purging out all of these disloyal officials, officials that he perceives to be disloyal. Maybe we should put it that way. And that is definitely going to have these Democrats and never Trumpers up in arms, trying to stop it, and still they're trying to get rid of him.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Trilogy Metals is a world-class developer in Alaska's Ambler mining district. The company already possesses 8 billion pounds of copper, 3 billion pounds of zinc, over 1 million gold-equivalent ounces, and now over 77 million pounds of cobalt. Trilogy's Arctic project boasts an after-tax net present value of $1.4 billion with a 33% IRR. Trilogy is led by an experienced management team with proven success in discovering and developing projects in Alaska. The company is well capitalized, has no debt, and possesses strong institutional support. Trilogy trades on the New York and Toronto exchanges under the ticker symbol TMQ. To learn more, go to trilogymetals.com. That's trilogymetals.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Well, yeah, they're still investigating them. So they're going to have investigations right up until the election. They're going to double and triple down on this strategy, which so far for the Democrats has been a big loser because Trump's approval rating is way up. People see him as being picked on unfairly by the Democrats who actually don't have a case. The stuff they keep pulling up is either incomprehensible or just pointless.
I know.
The Russiagate thing turned out to be just not true. And this Ukraine thing is baffling to the average American. Then why is Ukraine a super important ally all of a sudden when we've never heard the name of that country in national discourse until just now? And why is it that a phone call that Trump had with the president of Ukraine is a bigger deal than the obvious corruption of the Biden family, which is part of the same story? Why doesn't this hurt the Democrats more than the Republicans? And it apparently has. Biden
he's done. He's done.
Yeah. And it might not be Ukraine Gate that is killing Joe Biden's campaign, because there's a lot of other reasons.
Yeah.
he's not
non-compos
a good
mentis.
candidate.
He's non-compos mentis, let's face it.
Yeah,
the
yeah, he
guy,
kind of is. He's 10 years beyond the his expiration date
yeah,
in
his shelf
politics.
life. Yeah, he's
Yeah,
a couple bites short of a sandwich for sure.
yeah. And Elizabeth Warren, who's
Oh,
kind of the other potential savior of the Democrat establishment, has turned out to be kind of the opposite of Joe Biden. She's not. She's too green for prime time. She's making a lot of beginners' mistakes. She may be completely sharp mentally and strong physically and everything, but she's saying and doing things that have cost her a lot of support. So she's almost out of the picture now. She's still in it, but her polling numbers are so low that it now looks like Pete Buttigieg is the main opponent for
Bernie.
For Bernie Sanders. Yeah. So you got the mayor
don't forget Bloomberg.
of a pretty small city versus an avowed socialist, and then you've got Bloomberg, who's generating some pretty decent poll numbers. But if you look at the poll numbers per dollar, for what he's got to pay to get them, it's costing him a lot of money, but he doesn't seem to care. He's got hundreds of millions to throw at this.
Yeah, he's throwing it around. Like, remember, I said that the splitter strategy is alive and well, and it's going to be, nobody's dropping out for a while here. Not until after Super Tuesday, and probably not even then. So Biden takes enough votes, Buttigieg takes enough votes from Biden, and vice versa, so that neither of them can possibly hit the requisite number of delegates. And then Warren takes enough away from Bernie so that he can't hit the requisite number. And then coming to the charge, the midget behind the curtain, the wizard, the little dwarf, is Michael Bloomberg, and he's already bribed the Democratic Party. He's given them $350,000, $500,000. They're broke in debt, so he owns them now, just like Hillary did. And you could just see the handwriting on the wall. And then the implosion of the Iowa caucuses was. I mean, I shouldn't be shocked by anything, right? But it was pretty shocking, even from my way of looking at things here, John. Like, oh, it was a bad app, and it just happens to screw over Bernie Sanders because they can't, Bernie McGovern.
It seems completely plausible, and this is how low the Democrats have sunk in terms of the average person's opinion of their morality, not their competence, but the morality. That it's completely believable that they had all the numbers, but the numbers were really favorable to Bernie Sanders, and they decided it was better for them to just implode the process than to announce on election night that Bernie Sanders had won a big victory in the Iowa caucuses. I'm not saying that's true. I'm saying that it's believable because the Democrats are seen as so corrupt and so willing to steal elections. That's one very possible reason for what happened, and their complete incompetence is the other completely believable reason for it. But yeah, the Democrats are going to have a long primary ahead of them, and they're not going to settle things until towards the election. It's not going to be clear who they're running until just a month or two before the actual election, and Trump is going to sit there with total solid support of Republicans that whole time. And then, if it's Bloomberg, we're going to be treated to the spectacle of Bloomberg's size being an issue in the election because Trump is going to have so much fun with, little. What's his first name? Mikey.
Mini
Bloomberg,
Mike.
Mini Mike. And that's going to be an issue in a presidential election. This is just. Yeah, it's gonna be... and Trump will do it gleefully. He will have a ball making fun of Bloomberg's size, and that won't hurt him with his base at all. His base will just think it's hilarious. So American politics is in a really strange place. Have you ever heard of a TV show called The Good Fight? Speaking of that.
No, I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, it's on CBS All Access, which is a streaming service you can sign up for. And I signed up for that service the other day, and ended up binging that show. It's a lawyer show, and the central character is a liberal lawyer who descends into madness because of Trump derangement syndrome. and it's pretty funny, and it kind of fits what's happening out there. The Democrats are doing and acting like this character in this show does, because that's the only explanation for why they're behaving the way they're behaving, because they are clearly completely unhinged by this really uncouth kind of lowlife guy who in their opinion, who's the president now, and they can't handle it. They're completely losing it. So anyhow, that's kind of life imitating art there. But yeah, and your scenario of the Democrats just giving up on this crop of candidates and picking somebody who's a governor in some state out there and running them instead, that's still completely plausible, because they could reach the point where they have a choice of, Bernie, who's a socialist, who 50% of the Democrats believe could never win a presidential campaign because he's a socialist on the one hand, and then some, oligarch on the other hand. And those are their two choices. And they might just blow it off and say, okay, look, let's just take somebody who doesn't have these huge negatives and run them, because, we'll still get a guaranteed 45% of the vote, just because that's how many people will vote for any Democrat. And then we have a chance of pulling in 6 more percentage points with this guy who doesn't have all this baggage. So that could happen too. We could have a swing state governor who we've never heard of running for president, on the Democrat ticket.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Shortly. Yeah.
Tom Wolf of Pennsylvania and Tim Walz of Minnesota, because those are two must-have states. And they have, but I think that Bloomberg has enough money to totally upend the entire process and force his way through at the convention. Look, if he decided to pay $10 million per delegate, it would only be, what would it be? Like a couple $1 billion? He's got
it would be
$70 billion,
But see, that's the thing. That's you lose a lot of votes if you're an oligarch paying $10 million per delegate. That's not a winning strategy necessarily, because he could be right on all the issues, and Trump runs against him by saying, okay, so this delegate cost him $10 million, and that delegate, and
they'll have it on tape. Veritas will get it.
And he owns a media company that is not allowed to investigate him in this campaign. So how is he an agent of change in this world of any kind, and that's a legitimate way of running against somebody like Bloomberg. So he's not a guaranteed. He's not a lock. If
listen, though, when there's something you see that you absolutely have to have, whether it's an item, a trip around the world, or a car, consumer item, a computer, you absolutely become obsessed with it. You want it. No matter what you have to do, you are going to figure out how to get it. And that is Bloomberg running for president now. He wants that shiny little object, and he will pay any cost to obtain it. And that's what we're going to see here. That's what we're going to see here, John. They'll pay any price to get it.
Well, it's completely possible that is what we see. It's just and again, to take it back to finance, this is the kind of stuff that happens when you screw up your financial system. Your politics get crazier and crazier because the system doesn't work for these huge sections of people out there, and they're willing to roll the dice. So you get Bernie Sanders saying, we're going to give you basically free everything, and we're going to pay for it by, and the other really interesting story here, I'm writing a blog post on this now, which I think is just a really interesting way of looking at this. And, it's a failure on the part of the ruling class in the U.S. on such a profound level. And it should have been so obvious to them that they shouldn't have done what they did. In capitalism, and I think we've talked about this before, you got to have winners and losers. And in order for the winners to hold their wealth, to keep it, they have to address the plight of the losers and basically everybody else except them. So you got to be all about upward mobility if you're the 1% in a system like this. But these guys, our 1%, completely lost sight of that, and you've got, what are the billionaires of the world doing right now with their money? A lot of them are buying compounds in New Zealand with private airstrips.
Yep.
And they plan to ride out the end of the world, which they created in New Zealand, and so of course even if Bernie Sanders doesn't win this time, the next time around, somebody like him will be elected. And that guy will say, oh, you're going to New Zealand with the billions that you made here on the backs of, all these people who work in your warehouses if you're Jeff Bezos, or, in your slave labor factories if you're the guys at Apple. No, well, you can go ahead to New Zealand if you want, but we're going to keep all your wealth. We're going to freeze your bank accounts, and we're going to expropriate all your mansions and everything. We're going to give it to voters, and that will work politically. And it didn't have to happen. The 1% could have been a constructive force in the global economy. And instead, they just decided to suck as much wealth as they could out of the system. And, regular people be damned. But they lost track of the fact that there's a whole lot more voters in the 99% than in the 1%.
Yeah, that's it.
So this is going to happen, and it's their fault. It's we're going to get a financial French Revolution kind of thing going here, where instead of physical guillotines, although you can't rule that out either, but there are going to be financial guillotines where people are just stripped of their wealth. And Bernie Sanders would do it this time around if he gets in. So we could see it begin within a year. But if not, and it's business as usual for another presidential term, then we'll see it in 4 more years. This is coming just because so many people are so mad. And because they're so mad, expropriation is becoming a more and more attractive political platform. So one way or another, somebody's going to come along and do this. And you know what? It's poetic justice. These guys could have stopped it. They could have made the system
they're reaping what
a
they
really
sowed.
nice place. Yeah.
They're reaping what they sowed, and that's where we're at now. Anyway, we'll pick up more next week on all of this because it's not going away. It's going to be with us for the next 9 months here, John, and almost to the day. Not going away, so we will definitely be covering this more. Make sure you check out John's work at dollarcollapse.com, our site, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. The email to comment is kl@kerrylutz.com. Put up your comments on the site and put them up on YouTube. We've been addressing a lot of the YouTube comments lately. As someone else said here, Doug on YouTube, talking about the coronavirus. As the Boy Scouts say, their motto, be prepared. So let's be prepared, John, and be prepared for next week when we resume.
Okay. See you then, Kerry.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.